I think that really observing the destruction across the world, we see that cultural property is also, purposely targeted. It is deliberately included in many of the activities, and so that means that our preparedness and our planning needs to be on par as well. And here I want to turn to Colonel Walsh, and actually, I think it would be useful to explain why is a legal officer here with the Canadian Armed Forces and not just the guys training, and why, how is cultural property included in this planning and the work that you do?
Great, Latvia, thank you very much. It's great to be here on this stage and great to be in Latvia. So my name is Lieutenant Colonel Chavi Walsh. So I'm a legal officer, or a JAG, with the Canadian Armed Forces. And so our job is basically to advise the Canadian commander. So Canada has the framework nation here as a multinational brigade here in Latvia. And so I advise that commander on basically all issues dealing with the law of armed conflict, international humanitarian law, which involves both planning in peacetime and in conflict. I have two other legal officers here with me in Latvia deployed, and then I also support the mission in the Ukraine. So what we call up, well, it's basically in Poland right now, but I'm responsible for that as well, where we train the same issues on teaching and training LOAC concepts to Ukrainian officers. So I think for me, in terms of how I got to this position, it was kind of the attacks on cultural property really had a personal impact on me and my career choice. So back in 2001, in about March, I was in Canada finishing my undergraduate degree, and the Taliban attacked the giant Buddhas on the Silk Road. And I remember seeing that and thinking, what a loss to humanity. But it was so far away and distant. And then 6 months later, I was in my first day of law school at the University of Ottawa, and it was September 11th, and the Twin Towers were attacked. And I think in both those cases, it was an attack on bricks and stones and mortar, but it was more than that. It was an attack on, the identity of a people, the identity, the way of life of a people. And I think it really had a big impact on me in deciding that, I really needed to get involved and use my law degree somehow to deal with this issue or to address these attacks and these atrocities. But it took a while. I didn't know how. And so I graduated law school. I started working at a sports law firm with NHL players, and it was only until I was advising clients from ex-fighter pilots with the Canadian military who had worked in Libya, Afghanistan, Kosovo, and they told me about these war lawyers that they worked with that basically, before any mission, they basically could hold up a red card and basically stop an attack if the attack was considered to be disproportionate, or the collateral damage would be too high. And I thought, wow, that's a really interesting way to practice law. So I kind of traded my suit for combat boots and joined boot camp. And in 2013, I went to Afghanistan, Kabul, with the U.S. Marines, and saw kind of firsthand the scars on a country and a nation, and the direct impact on a people from conflict. And so when this mission came up for, to deter and defend Russian aggression here in the Baltics, I jumped on the opportunity, and it brings me here today, so I'm really proud to be here. So what does a JAG do? So basically, like I said, we're kind of the commander's LOAC, or Law of Armed Conflict, brain. We know all the rules and advise the commander on all stages of planning, so both in peacetime and then in conflict with regards to kind of what's onside, what's offside. But it's also an educational function, so it's not always the first thing that commanders think about in terms of cultural protections. They might know generally as to the basic rule, but it's how you integrate that knowledge into early stages of the planning cycle. And I think that's where the partnerships really come in. So we can help reinforce and amplify the point that it's not just the legal obligation that you will get potentially prosecuted for a war crime if you don't comply. So it's not the hammer approach, it's more the preventative approach. So why is it important to mission success? How does protecting the cultural property of the host nation allow you to keep the reputation intact as being a partner in the rule of law, and winning public opinion or not losing public opinion, which I think is critical, because if you can't see to be applying the rules and the law and the respect for the cultural property, I think it can have a really direct impact on mission success. And Canada has experience in losing public confidence in armed conflicts where laws of armed conflict were not followed, and once you lose public opinion, basically the mission is over. So I think that's a real point we reinforce too as JAGs. So not technically legal, but we are in that space. And the great thing about JAGs is we have direct access to the commander by law and policy at all times. We're separate from the chain of command. So that's not the same in all militaries, but for the Canadian military, it's they keep a certain degree of independence from the JAGs, from the military chain. So we wear the same uniforms and we wear rank, but we're not ever integrated into the chain of command. So it gives us the ability to have full, frank conversations without fear of career implications, and that can be a hard space to work in, but it's an important space. So I think that's kind of why what we do, and we're here till 2029 at least, Canada. So we're committed to Latvia and the Baltic nations to under NATO to protect and defend Latvia and its cultural properties and heritage. But we're here also to learn. To learn what we don't know. It's a nation. We need to work with the civilian partners, things like Blue Shield, UNESCO, the host nation, the Ministry of Culture, to understand what are the important cultural pieces here, so we can integrate those into inventories, plannings, GPS maps. All the laws you have are not effective without knowledge, and that comes from partnerships, being here for conversations like today, and continuing that and building off that.
But I guess that's what you also do, Lieutenant Colonel Walsh, regarding the planning stage and training stage. And if you could talk a little bit more about how you cooperate with various other institutions, agencies, what is it on the practical level, how protection of cultural property is integrated?
Great. Peldias, Minister. I think it's really important that inter-cooperation, it really plants the seed of how important this topic is, and you think about things that you didn't think about before and how it fits into your daily work. And I think that's why the conversations are important, because they really start generating a lot of questions, and it does spark a lot of interest. I think people are inherently very interested in this subject, because it's really the reason we do this work is for these humanitarian principles, and it is an issue to all humankind. So how we do it practically. So we plant those seeds early at basic training. So every soldier gets, at first, it starts with knowledge. So what are the general laws of armed conflict? How do they apply to the soldier on the ground? In terms of, so it's an education which builds a degree of respect for areas where they may be operating. And it also then, it translates into what we have is called a code of conduct. So basically 10 simple rules that all soldiers have to follow. And one of those is to protect and respect cultural property in times of armed conflict. So those are, simple. We have produced kind of a little booklet on law of armed conflict that we now issue. It's new this year. So again, it just tries to simplify these concepts, but bring them to the front of soldiers' mind in the training. So at the very basic level. And we do build in this aspect of discipline as well. So not only must you do it for the altruistic reasons, but it is breaches of armed conflict can result in disciplinary charges, and I think that's important because we need accountability here as well. An undisciplined military force can actually do more damage than the enemy. So that's always a theme that runs through our work. Beyond that training, we get more advanced training, and again, plant those seeds and nurture them as officers get to more of the senior ranks, captains, majors, where they'll be involved in planning. So they get more advanced training on the law of armed conflict, including on cultural property protections, the Hague Conventions, AP2, which has, some unique parts of the treaty in which, there are certain decisions that cannot be taken by lower levels of command. They must be taken kind of at the brigade level or the battalion level. And it's just without the knowledge, it's very easy to violate some of these obligations. And I think that's a big part of our job, like I said, again, education, training. And then we spread that to allies as well. So here in Latvia, we're working with GHQ, so they're our military partners, and their legal side to train them on some of our best practices. They're implementing our 10 rules code of conduct, and so that's new. We're just starting that in November. So being here, it generates ideas and initiatives, and I think that's really helpful. And then we're also, of course, training in Op Unify, or the Ukrainian forces who are coming out of the field, seeing kind of the real damages of conflict on their country, and then trying to train them on the importance of these rules. It's a very tough training audience, but again, it's critical because we have to keep on emphasizing that the conflict is more than just the here and now. It's how do we rebuild after, and it's not always going to get the reception we want, but it is important work, and so we take the training seriously. In planning, so like I said, the JAG's roles in plans, op plans, starts in kind of peacetime. Militaries will only really do what they're ordered to do. And if they're not ordered to think about and be aware of cultural property protections, again, it's not something intuitive. And we see this in the past from the Iraq wars and conflicts, and where it's just not, if it's not built into the op plan, the military just doesn't know what it doesn't know, and will be so mission focused that through negligence or inadvertence, as opposed to willful destruction, you can have the same result, which is the loss of these properties and protections. So really important that we get involved in the early order planning stage. Then you have to identify. So mission specific. So when you get to a certain area, we don't know. So we need, again, like I said at the outset, to work with host nation, Blue Shield, UNESCO, to identify inventories and use those to build into kind of specific implemented military tools and tasks, like no strike lists, so for targeting. So we'll plug in the GPS coordinates right into geographical mapping software that targeters use. So when a target pops up, and if it's got a GPS tag on it, the targeters will stop, and it will trigger the conversations, and then we can come in and give the advice to the commanders as to the proper balance, according to LOAC, for how we should proceed. So I think that's important. And that's mostly in the training world. And like I said, on the advice side, so after we move from kind of planning into now we're in the conflict, the JAGs, like I said before, have direct access to the commanders, and we give kind of real-time, independent, objective, unencumbered advice to the commander, which is basically the cardinal rule of you do not attack cultural property, you do not damage it, you must protect it. You can't use it so that it becomes a military objective. And there is, a proportionality assessment that has to be done to ensure that if by whatever means the enemy is using it, or the military must use it, there's a very strict kind of military necessity test. And it's not military convenience, it's military necessity. And that's sometimes hard advice to give, and that's why it's so important that the legal advisors have these structural safeguards like independence. And like I said, what I mean by that is, I think it's very important that the legal advisor is detached from the chain of command so they can give that advice that sometimes would be career limiting, but you need those frank, honest conversations if you're going to have an impact. So I think that's a critical piece, not just in what we do, but some of the structural protections that involve that role. And then access. So our policies and doctrine make sure that the JAG always has direct access to the chain of command, so the commander themselves. So it's not like the other advisors where you might have to wait in line to get access. I think access is something that has to be built in. So you really cannot make some of these targeted decisions without having a JAG right there. And that's not the same for all militaries. So again, those are some of our kind of experiences we found have been really beneficial to make sure that the work is effective. And then we also play a piece, of course, in the enforcement. So after the fact, that there either our forces have breached or we're investigating an allegation of a war crime through destruction of property, we have part of our plan, our overall plan is to make sure we have domestic kind of criminal legislation to enforce these protocols and treaties, whether it's Geneva Convention or the Hague Conventions, because again, without teeth at the domestic level, it's hard to give power and to make these obligations real. And so we've built those kind of into our domestic legislation, and again, that's not enough. You need not just the legislation, but then you need independent military justice stakeholders who can enforce. So independent prosecutors, independent courts that have legitimacy and constitutional protections to make sure that they are both seen to be effective and legitimate by the public and the international community, because at the end of the day, a lot of the international laws are enforced by the countries themselves. And I think that's something that, I don't just say, and I've worked in the prosecution service for about 7 years after Afghanistan, prosecuting privates all the way up to major generals, and some were involved in kind of, crimes that committed in war zones. So I know firsthand of the importance of having an effective independent prosecution service, and then having the courts who are also independent. And it's not just me saying that. Our Supreme Court of Canada has actually just recently kind of validated the independence of those courts, because when you have kind of military prosecuting military or military judges kind of at the tribunals, there's an inherent perception of a conflict of interest. And that's why it's important to test those and challenge those things and bring a challenge and let it run through the civilian courts. And then if it's upheld, again, it helps with that public perception and legitimacy, which helps say, we take this seriously, we will enforce these laws, and we set an example, I think, to the international community. But again, all these things are not necessarily obvious, and it's where you need a lot of the, it's not just the treaties, it's not just the law, it's also the other pieces that all come together as part of the overall plan of how we make sure that these concepts are brought into force.
Yeah, thank you. Vitalis Rekstens from the Ministry of Culture. My question is, in my previous position, Minister of Defense, was very similar, like your legal advisor to the International Operations Center. One is the approach which was mentioned in discussion, this focus on international missions, when we have plenty of time, have options to bring experts and evaluate and also withdraw some attacks or change our rules of engagement at that time. But we are living in the total defense nation, which every regional or local battalion commander should take also decisions about warfighting, and they are prioritized to do something. We will bring this difference to this planning, because not all these territorial defense units have these legal advisors who can support them with this additional advice. So what is your advice to the territorial defense nations?
Well, I think that's a good point, and I think it's probably the same in our country as well. Not everyone has access to the same training, and there are different levels of planning and command at the tactical level. Some of these things might be in doctrine or policy, but don't get drilled down. So I think that's kind of why we take steps like producing these documents that are very user-friendly and then widely distributed. So we inject ourselves more into when we get closer to areas in which we will potentially be in crisis. I think it's, again, it comes back to the planning. We have to, even if it's not being done now, we have to then identify those gaps, so have a gap analysis, and find out how, and it's not just legal, right? Legal can be involved and help produce, but it's, we have CIMIC, we have other parts of the military, and then working with partners. So it's not just, I don't think it's just a military responsibility. There are other organizations. I don't know if Blue Shield is very active here, but in other places, there are organizations that will, give training or give presentations to again, plant those seeds at the lowest level. I think it has to start there. So we are working with our colleagues, like I said, at JHQ, that are not just for the regular force, but also for the Home Guard and exercising. So we participate in things like Names and Night Names just recently. And again, it lets us know kind of where the gap spaces are. So don't have a perfect solution yet, but I think it starts with, again, education and knowledge, and then, seeing where those gaps are and trying to fill them as best as you can at the lowest level.
What would your kind of recommendation for the coming 5 years be?
It's I think even with the strongest laws, an enemy who's committed and motivated to attacking culture, the laws will not really stop them. So it's kind of too late when the bullets start flying. The advice really is on the mitigation and preparation to, again, build those partnerships so you can safeguard, have a plan to potentially move what can be moved, using the assistance of, the military here that might have those tools, logistics to assist in that, or at least have a plan to know when we will do things, because we're very good at planning, but we have to make sure that it's raised to a certain level of importance so that it gets a priority in the military plans. And I think that's, like I said, a lot of it's education. So I'd like to see more education on the military side, to have it's very important, I think, for our military commanders who will be kind of commanding armed forces in this area to go and explore these sites personally, to go to the Baltics, to see this. It's one thing to see it on a map as an icon, but it's another thing to stand in some of these buildings and learn the history, because that's really what the fight is about. It's about protecting the identity, the culture, the heritage of the people from those who are motivated to destroying it. And I think that's not just a local problem; that's a humanity problem. And so I think it's not just NATO-led. I think each country has to amplify and develop their own doctrines so that they train before they get here. They train. They already bring these concepts with them. We're here as a framework nation and a multinational brigade, leading 12 other nations. And sometimes it's hard just to know what people's ethos, values, ethics are, and then selling them on something that they haven't really implemented in their own nations is kind of you're already behind the 8 ball. So that's a little too late. So I think I'd like to, again, just make sure that, again, the knowledge education, the emphasis on why this is important, and not just because it's like you'll get prosecuted for it, which could be true, but there are bigger motivations that can be implemented through doctrine and training for on the military side. And then second, I think it's just, like I said, even for legal advisors, there are a lot of rules and laws in the law of armed conflict that we're responsible for, training and advising on. And I think involving us in more international workshops, conferences, so we know what is the common best practices, what are the experts saying in these areas, interacting with culture, which we're good at MOD and working with defense, but not always thinking about engaging with other departments and other government or agencies. So I think for us, I'd like to see more networking. And I think that will happen as we spend a longer time in this area. But again, a lot of it's preparation on my side.
Well, I guess part of it is why we're here, right? In the security conference format, where sometimes this also doesn't seem like the topic to include, but as soon as we begin the conversation, we realize the importance of it. And obviously, as you said, why we're all doing this is to protect our countries, protect our people, to protect our communities, and then building communities is what we need to do to be able to better respond to any kind of challenge. And I'm very thankful for your participation here today, and also for the engagement of your colleagues and you yesterday with cultural institutions, because this is how I think we build the mutual understanding, but also I think reassert the importance of every single element of our societal resilience. And if there is, I don't think there is any question why we should invest in culture. I think we all are well aware that that is investing in our people, in our self-awareness, in our resilience, and not necessarily in buildings and in infrastructure. That is important as well, but the main rationale behind it is so that we are stronger together and more self-aware and proud, and then also will be able to better face any types of crisis that come our way. So I want to thank very much Lieutenant Colonel Walsh from the Canadian Armed Forces and Dr. Frederik Rosén for being here with me today. And thank you also to the organizers of the conference and my team for putting this together. Thank you so much. Awesome.